Welcome back. My guest today is Jason McAteer, once of Bolton Wanderers, Liverpool, Blackburn Rovers, Sunderland and of course, Ireland. I've met and worked with Jason a couple of times and I really liked him. Thought he was a smart guy, fun guy, with a point of view that I like to listen to. Now Jason, in his excellent autobiography, describes the concept that there, through his career, have been two versions of him. Trigger, which was the nickname he carried throughout his playing career, was a bit of a lad, always up for fun and trouble. Jason, meanwhile, was a much deeper thinker and not just about football. In ways, I guess, you'll meet both of them. We spend a lot of time on Bruce Rioch, a big footballer for Scotland and for Derby and Everton during the 70s, whose managerial stock was sky high when he took Jason's Bolton up 2 divisions. You're going to learn about Jason's mentality too, which I think is heavily influenced by the start he had in the game. A start which is increasingly rare these days. In this series of interviews, we've heard it before, but Mr. McAteer heard the words, "you'll never make it," or their equivalent, a lot, particularly in a local watering hole. And as you'll go on to listen to, he learned to use all of this as fuel, use it to his advantage. Concepts that I identified with a lot. Parental warning, we start quite heavily on golf, and boy, I love talking golf to Jason. We could have made the entire interview about that sport, and he's very articulate about something that he's obsessed by. Jason played alongside Roy Keane for Ireland for 8 years, and against him in the Premier League midfields for the same period. Roy, well, yeah, he's a complicated boy. Jason experienced both the good and bad of life in that orbit. And Mr. McAteer's hero growing up as a Liverpool fan was King Kenny Dalglish. Therefore, I ask you, picture the scene. He's in King Kenny's office at Blackburn Rovers, yet a £9 million deal for Jason and his Bolton teammate Alan Stubbs is on the table when the phone rings and it's Liverpool on the line. What happens next? Why? Wait, that's the wrong show. This isn't a detective series. This is the big interview. And this is the very listenable Jason McAteer. Enjoy, and if you do, please tell people, friends, family, strangers in the street, strangers in the night, strangers on the shore. This is Graham and I approve this message. Dear listeners to the big interview, we're now live with an Irish legend, one of the fighting McAteers, a true Wirral Scouser. We're in the very, very pleasant and estimable company of Jason McAteer. Jason, good afternoon to you and welcome to the big interview.
It's an absolute pleasure, mate, to come on. I think, what is it? What am I? 108? Is it? Why is it taking you so long?
108 because we couldn't get in touch with you. In terms of quality, that's just a number of where you've appeared. There's something that puts you high up in quality, and I know that already because we've shared a stage in Dublin once, which is a great boast of mine. Now, Jason, today we've been arranging our timetables around each other, which means both of us need to get a better life. But you could see from our WhatsApp conversation that I was on the golf course earlier on today, knocking the Dazzy around in startling style. But the last time that I did an interview with one of our guests on the golf course, it was at the Belfry, and it was Stan Petrov of Celtic and Aston Villa fame. And that interview, Jason, started off really strangely because just apropos of nothing, I said, what's your favourite club in the bag? And he got into probably the pitching wedge because around the green, I'm totally steely and that. And within seconds, we're talking about his time in the Bulgarian army and how the greatest thing he can boast about is that he can still blindfold himself and strip down an AK-47 and put it back together again. You can see where this is going. So my 2 questions to you would be, if you reach for the golf bag, irrespective of where you think you are on a hole or on what course you are, what's the club that says to you, yeah, Jason, it's me again, I'm ready?
Well, first of all, I'm obsessed by golf. Obsessed with it. The swing, like I'm right into it. The biomechanics of it. A lot of my mates are all golfers. I'm a big watcher of golf. So yeah, I'm right on your page here. My go-to club, I would probably say 8-iron. A nice controlled club. Yeah, it's a nice distance. You know, you're looking between 140, 150, anything sort of around that. You can also use it around the greens to a little bump and run now and again. But if you said to me, right, you've got to pull a club out the bag, I'd go 8-iron, mate.
And when you talk about the biomechanics of the swing, are you thinking not just about where you want the swing to start and finish, but your physical shape and how you want to fade or turn the ball? When you talk about the biomechanics of the swing, what have you done to affect that, and to what end?
Lessons. I think if you look through my book collection, probably 80% will be about golf, the swing. And there's so different, obviously so many variants of it and stuff. And, you know, I'm obsessed with YouTube and Instagram, and, you know, I listen to a lot of coaches and stuff. I've got one now that I go and see, obviously not through lockdown, but before lockdown, I was with him, and, you know, just trying to learn basically consistency of a swing. It's funny really, because if you said to me, you can skank one from 140 yards to a foot away from the hole, or you could hit one out the middle, pops right out and goes 20 yards over the green, which one would you take? I'd take the 20 yards over the green all day long, because it was just felt right. It was in the right position. It looked great and it popped out the club. There's nothing worse than a skanky one, but there's nothing like drilling a drive down the middle of a fairway 300 yards, obviously in Spain or somewhere hot, where you get that little bit of extra flight. But yeah, it fascinates me, mate. It absolutely fascinates me.
If you're out there on your own, which I love, it's a very different atmosphere than you're out in a pair or in a four, and you're hitting shots. And I'm obviously owning up here something myself. I talk to myself a lot, because I quite like my own company. I find myself funny. But if I'm out on the golf course and I'm hitting a shot, I'll be talking as I've hit it. Oh, Graham, you beauty. Graham, hold on a second. I'll be, you know, if you were to stumble upon me on a golf range or alone, and I'm playing 18 on myself, the degree to which I'm talking to myself is high. Do you do that, or have you got all the conversations stored up in your head as you've hit, or you say, no, listen, no, I wanted to fade that, or I see that, so this is what I'll do. Do you talk to yourself a wee bit?
Yeah, I'm a talker, mate. Yeah, I've always done that, and it's not just with golf. My career, you know, I would very often talk to myself during the game. You know, I talk to myself as in I'm Macca, and it's a third person, and it's like, you know, I've read Steve Peters' Chimp Paradox, so it's very much the chimp is in my ear. And I'll be like, Macca, what was that? Or, you know, Macca, come on, let's go back to basics. Or, come on, Macca, breathe. Or, come on, Macca, you know, we've got 2 minutes, you know, to go, or whatever it is. Or, come on, just hang in. So I've always been a talker. On the golf course, as you know, there's nothing more frustrating. So, and we don't hit the perfect shot all the time, mate. We're 3 in 10, aren't we? You know, if that. And, you know, so for the other 7 shots, I'm actually beating myself up. So, like, what is that? And there's plenty of expletives in there. And, I am very, very critical of myself and beat myself up. I practice a lot. I put a lot of effort into it. I do think for the effort, you should always be rewarded. And it's the most unrewarding game, innit? For the amount of practice you put in.
Growing up as a Scot, we had a midfield at one stage with Asa Hartford, Don Masson and Bruce Rioch. And Bruce I've met and I like, and we got on. But you're in a privileged position, because this guy that made a club that's now struggling desperately, but is one of the historic famous members of the football family in England, and he's also the guy that gifted Dennis Bergkamp to Arsenal. You had a really good first-hand knowledge of. He had a big influence on you. But what was the kind of car that Bruce Rioch made you give back, and why did he do that?
Mate, I signed for Phil Neal at Bolton. I was on £100, and I went to the bank and got a £2,000 loan and bought a Mini Metro, an Austin Mini Metro, blue. And I tore the arse out of it up and down the M62 up to Bolton, to Bendon Park every day via Halewood. and speak, because 3 of the lads used to jump in. It was like sardines in this car, mate. And in the end, the engine fell out of it, and I just battered it. But luckily for me, I was doing well, and I signed a new contract. And Bruce had come into the club, and he sat me down and he said, "You do well for me, I'll look after you, and I'll improve your contract every time you do well for me. And we'll set targets and all this kind of stuff," which was great management, because it was an incentive for me. And as you rightly say, I had a fantastic relationship with him. Took to him straight away. Colin Todd was his assistant, and me and Alan Stubbs have a laugh. We kind of felt that Stubbsy was Colin Todd's project, and Bruce was mine, or I was his. And Colin would stay behind with Stubbsy, and Bruce would stay behind with me, and we'd work on left foot, right foot, heading, third man running, all this kind of stuff, shooting. And I loved it. Tackling, how to tackle properly, how to tackle and get away with it. All these things. He taught me so much. But to go back to your question, is if you've ever been to Burndon Park, or you ever remember Burndon Park, when you come off the motorway, you come round, you go down the hill. And on the right-hand side, Burndon Park's on your right-hand side, but just before you get to Burndon Park, there's a row of shops on the right, which there was a pie shop there, which Bruce Rioch used to make on your birthday. You had to buy the pies and cakes, and they'd get across after training, all the lads in the bath, pies and cakes, and you'd all have a bit of banter, and it was great. And just before Burndon Park on the right-hand side, there was a little independent car showroom, tiny. And in this car showroom was a green Lotus Elan. And we used to pass it every day going into training. And I used to look at this car, mate, and I used to think, I want that car. I want that car. And, I've done it with a few things in my life. I remember looking at a suit in a shop window and thought, I want that suit. And I got the suit. I saved enough money and I got the suit. And I remember looking Burndon Park. I remember watching the first team when I was just signed, and the crowd was full. It was brilliant atmosphere. And I remember saying to myself, I want to play for the first team here. I want to do that. And I managed to do it. And then Anfield, I was standing on the Kop against Bristol City or Bristol Rovers. They beat Liverpool. Suey was the manager, knocked them out the FA Cup. But I remember that night thinking, I'd love to play. I want to play here. I want to play here. And, all these dreams have come true for me. But this Lotus Elan was one of them moments. It was one of the, I want that car. I want that car. So I signed a new deal. So I goes in. I says to Stubbsy, me and Stubbsy used to sign these deals. We were like in clockwork, me and Stubbsy. So we signed these deals. So I said to Stubbsy, I'm buying a new car. And he went, so am I. And just further up the road was a Vauxhall garage. So Stubbsy went up to the Vauxhall garage to buy his new car. And I went in this little independent showroom, and I walked in, and the fella, he knew straight away. And I said, I want to buy this car. And he said, okay. And we sorted out all the paperwork, and I drove it out the showroom. In fact, the next day I went back and picked it up. The next day I went back, and it was all like shiny, and it was all ready for me. Finished training, couldn't wait to get up there. Got me Lotus Elan convertible, like shot home, racing green. It was racing green. Got home, my mum's like looking at me, what is that? I'm made up, right? So I'm like, drives into training the next day, parks it up, like in the car park, goes into training. Bruce walks straight into the dressing room. He just goes, this is before training, he goes, whose is the Lotus Elan? So I've gone, oh my God. So I've gone, yeah, Gaffer, it's mine. He's gone, come and see me after training. So I've gone, all right. I've gone and seen him after training. All training, I'm thinking, what's going on? So I've gone into training. He said, I've had your mum on the phone. He said, that car, he said, I'm not having it. You're driving up and down the M62 every day. He said, not having it. He said, you're crashing that, you're dead. He said, I've rang so-and-so from the car showroom. He's got a cheque there. He's going to give you all your money back. He went, drive up there and go and buy yourself a proper car, like Stubbsy. He bought an Astra. Stubbsy had bought an Astra. So in the end, I've had to go to the Vauxhall garage. I ended up buying a Vauxhall. And mate, every day, that Lotus Elan went back in the window, and every day that Lotus Elan was like that at me, just shaking its head, just like, what more can I say? And I had to give it back, and that was it. One day I had it, one day.
Change times. I can't walk past Bruce Rioch teaching you about third man run or tackling, how to tackle well, how to get away with one. People that listen to this series, they're genuinely interested in the art of football. Pick anything out of those examples you gave and explain what he taught you.
We used to play a lot of practice matches, a lot of shape with Bruce. He was a stickler, for playing into Andy Walker. I mean, we had some fantastic Scots play for us. Ian McNeil was the scout up there, brought out.
Johnny McGinley.
Yeah, John McGinley, Andy Walker. What a player Andy Walker was. John was very raw, but very effective. Coyley was brilliant. What a fella Coyley is. Stevie Fulton come down. Mixu Patalainen come down. Mate, it was brilliant. But Bruce, I mean, I was talking to you there about, things he taught me. But we had a player called Mark Patterson. Right, northern boy, Paddy was. I think he was from somewhere like Preston. He'd been at the club a while. Rough, like dogged, like aggressive, hard as nails. So anyway, we were playing this practice match, but he used to kick shit out of me, Paddy, because I was like this young kid. I'd just come into the team. And to be all honesty, he was a threat to his position because I'd gone into midfield. So we played in this practice match. Mate, he smashed me. He cut me in half, like smashed me. Got up. You're told, especially from the family I'm from, you don't show pain. You just get up and you carry on. You don't show it like you're defeated. You just get on with it. If you get the opportunity, you get them back. So we come off half time, and Bruce just says because we had a couple of young lads playing to make up the numbers, just says to one of the young lads, off, and he comes on. Bruce comes on, middle of the park, 5 minutes gone, giving the ball away. Anyway, the ball goes out. I remember it goes out to the left, and Paddy is going towards the ball, and Bruce just goes diag and just like full pelt. Mate, he tackles him up here, like 2-footed up here. It's like smashes him like you remember Bruce Rioch, like he just smashes him. And like stands up. He was like that Ali Foreman where he stands up and he's looking over him. It's like that moment. He's like, and he just turned around to me and he went, "That's how you tackle." And I just remember thinking like one, he's like proper looked after me. So it was that like, yeah, he's on the gaffer, like he's on my side. But also I just thought like, I'm never gonna if I have to get someone back, I'm gonna muller them. Do you know what I mean? Because obviously it's acceptable for him. It's acceptable for me. And obviously that's what he likes. So mate, I was like, I mean, a lot of my games for Bolton, I used to fly into tackles. I used to like smash people and stuff, and I got a thirst for it. I actually loved like the art of tackling. I loved it. I loved like a 50-50. I never shirked out of a 50-50, mate. Never. And you give me one, I used to love it.
You come from a family. Several of them were extremely good in the ring. But just because you come from, you said obviously the stock I come from, just because you come from that family doesn't mean that you necessarily, you have to be fighting everybody all the time. And I wonder, did you take into your game, whether it was Marine, whether it was as you went forward through Bolton and Liverpool and Sunderland or whatever, did you initially think, I have to be careful not to be falling out with everybody and resorting to fists all the time, that you had to mask a part of your inherent character that comes from right across your family?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to learn to be professional, haven't you? I mean, it's one thing going from Sunday League football where everyone, 20 people are watching on the line. When a fight goes off, everyone dives in. It's just like the OK Corral. I mean, that's how I grew up playing Sunday League football. There was plenty of them occasions. But when you're playing football, there comes a consequence to getting set off, innit? Because, your team goes down to 10 men. There's a crowd. There's repercussions. You could lose the game, 3 points, promotion. Fined, you get fined thousands of pounds. So, there has to be a professional edge to it. I mean, like I said, don't get me wrong, if there's a 60-40 against, I'm still going in for it, but I'm going to try and be cute about it and not get sent off. Listen, the way I grew up, I see a clinical psychologist now. He's a sports psychologist as well. And I speak to him regular, mate, certainly through lockdown and stuff. It's been a difficult time, and I speak to him, and we've kind of like gone through a lot of stuff, and we're actually now on a page of like, why people are moulded a certain way and why certain things happen. And we've gone back to my childhood and stuff. And, I was always, I was conditioned to win, like just to win. Now, in life, for 90% of my professional life or 100% of my professional life, that might have been a good thing to have, a good quality to have, because it got me to where I was. It got me to how I was as a footballer and what have you. But, in life, you can't always win. Sometimes, it's not about winning the battle, it's about winning the war, innit? And sometimes you've got to concede the battle. And, if it's a tug of war, sometimes you've got to drop the rope. If it's an argument, you've got to drop the rope sometimes. So winning is not always an option in life. But in football and sport, you know, it was something that got me to, you know, the echelons of the game, you know, to the elite, of playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world and playing for my country. But there has to be a professionalism about the way you go about that.
But I wonder whether, if you're being taught that winning is everything, to win everything, from small to medium to large all the time, is one of the things to decouple from that, because a lot of kids today are not taught that. If you talk, you'll know this inside out. If you talk to any scout, any coach, there are a lot of kids who don't feel the way you were taught to feel, and that you actually sometimes have to take a talented kid, boy or girl, but we're talking about the professional game here, and actually look to G them up without going over all the boundaries that now get you kicked out of the game and so on and so forth. But I wonder if teaching people that winning is important, that winning is everything, but taking shame away from being defeated or losing, or being able to say, that's not the battle I want to fight right now. If you can take that shame thing away, which I think wasn't taken away, I'm older than you, but when we were growing up, in that idea of you have to win everything all the time, you have to be hard, you have to decouple the idea of stepping away or losing occasionally is shameful, because that's one of the ways you can keep the hard edge but not beat yourself up, I think.
You can't win everything. You know, you know, it's impossible, isn't it, to win everything, to win every battle, whether it's small, big, whatever it may be. You know, whether it's an argument or an FA Cup final or a Champions League, whatever it, World Cup. You know, you can't win everything. You've got to take the adversity though, and you've got to take the feeling, the emotion, and you've got to harness it to you know, to bring the good out of it. There's no good. I mean, obviously you can sulk initially. You know, you're sulking and you're upset and you're just disgusted or you whatever. But you've got to use that as a fuel. You've got to use that to harness, like, you know, inside you, that you don't want to do that again. You don't want that feeling again. So you will try even harder next time. Mate, I worked in a pub when I was 19 years of age. I was working in the Sportsman's just up the road from Tranmere Rovers' ground. I was a barman. And these fellas used to come into the pub. And I'd signed for Marine. I was a semi-pro. I was making a few headlines, like clubs were watching me and blah, blah, blah. And I remember these fellas saying to me, you will never make it. You've got no chance. You're too old. You're not good enough. You're too skinny. Listen, you're waiting in a pub. No one's going to sign you. And, you know, a lot of 19-year-olds, certainly from 19-year-olds of the millennials that I've come across, would take that like, oh, like I'm not good enough. And I took it as, I'll show you that I'm good enough. And I harnessed that. I took it on. And do you know what? When I signed for Liverpool, I went back to that pub to look for them fellas. I went back to walk into that bar in that pub. You know, a couple of the same people, same faces were there. The two fellas weren't there. But I went in to see them, to go, what were you saying to me? What, you know, I've proved you wrong. And I had a lot of that growing up. I had a lot of people telling me, you can't do this, you can't do that. There's no such thing, mate. If you want it, then you've got to harness the bad stuff, and you've got to fuel it to what drives you to be a winner, or what drives you to get to where you want to be. You know, whatever your dream is or whatever your passion is, you've got to harness it. And if that means trying harder, you know, I beat myself up on the golf course all the time. But, you know, my sports psychologist says you've got to try harder. You've got to practice harder. You've got to, you know, that's the only way you're going to get better. You know, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't put the club down. Don't tell yourself you can't do it. Get out and practice. And that's what you've got to do. It's easy to quit. You know, it's harder to practice more.
You're in an area that I find interesting, Jason, so again, stop me if you want, but when those voices from those two particular guys in the bar were in your head, did you quite often stoke yourself with it? Did you have to go back to that anger? Because I think it is that I'll show you. That's anger. Did you have to sort of touch it every now and again to give yourself a G up again? I'm still showing them. Did that anger live with you for a long time? Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, pre-season. Or, do you know what? Mate, do you know what? They come into your head when it's pissing down with rain. You've got to get 2 trains to training and a bus. and a 20-minute walk, and it's pissing down, it's freezing, and they come in your head, and you're thinking, like, what am I doing? And freezing, it's like, I'm not even in the first team at Marine, I'm in the reserves, I've got to get home. And then two pop in your head going, you'll never make it. And you just think, like, the harder I try, the more effort I put in, even now when I'm at the lowest. Rolly Howard, he took me to a first team game in Marine. I thought I was going to play. Mate, I didn't even get stripped. He had me picking up the dirty undies after the game and loading the kit up and, turning the socks inside out. He took me just to help the kit man, like Marine's first team. And I was like, them moments, like, you just think to yourself, what's it all about? I went home and cried my eyes out. And, like, these people who say, you will never make it, that's when they pop into your head. That's when they pop into your head. And, they drive you. I'm not saying it's, I did it to prove them wrong. Obviously, I wanted to be a footballer and I had to do it the hard way. But, proving people wrong is something that I enjoy doing.
I wanted to talk more about Bruce. I've got to be careful of your time, although you know that this is a longer interview than normal. We've got also sponsors' questions and we've got members' questions, but I can't really leave without two things about Bruce. I remember I read in your book the anecdote about Bruce at a cup tie when the fans are queuing up. If I'm not wrong, Bruce made players from Bolton go around the queue with cups of tea just to keep the people happy and to show that whether it was ordered to or not, that we care about you. And although it's an anecdote from a long time ago, I liked his idea that the fans were important enough that the players should go and give them a cup of tea, a brew, while they were queuing up for tickets. That's a true anecdote.
100%, mate. You ask any player that was there whether we did that, they'll all confirm that story is true. For a couple of reasons. I think, firstly, you touched on the crowd there. I think even through these tough times, this pandemic, I think it's showing, certainly in football, it's showing, what an influence a crowd has. Certainly Liverpool's emotional tie to their crowd, to the Kop, is, we're missing that now. It's not there. I think results are justifying that as well. The way away results are, I think that's playing into the mix. That just crowds, how influential that and being on the pitch in front of, I played in front of 120,000, I played in front of 3,000. They make a difference, mate, to you as a footballer. They just do. They enlighten the feeling, the emotion in you, the adrenaline. They help. So I think first and foremost, Bruce's relationship with the fans. He knew that we needed the fans. He knew that Bolton, the fan base that we had a really close connection to the players and the team, and he wanted to keep that. But also he wanted to keep the players on the feet on the ground. And it's easy to run away with yourself when you're earning a few quid and you're buying Lotus of lands for a day, and you're living the life as a footballer. It's easy to forget, a little bit of where you come from and, what actually happens in real life. It is easy to get away from that. And I think it's just a little bit of, listen, let's just keep your feet on the ground. Let's do everything right. Let's give a little bit back, and let's keep this relationship with the fans, because you're going to need them, when it's not going so well. So, yeah, we were out there giving cups of tea out while they were queuing up for cup tickets, yeah.
It's the way it should be. So our sponsors are Bet365, and they've sent a ton of questions, but one that I quite like, it's simply stated. It's one of the most obvious questions to ask you. But who would you describe as the best footballer you ever played against in your career? And it's a completely personal choice.
I remember some of the tough games. John Solarco tore me to pieces one game. Smashed him, got a yellow card, and couldn't touch him after that. He twisted me inside out. He was one of them horrible wingers. He was just so clever with the ball, left, right. You didn't know where he was going. And he gave me a torrid time one game. I've been privileged to be on the pitch with some of the best, mate. Lothar Matthäus, Baresi. And then I've come up against, in my positions, the likes of Paolo Maldini, Roberto Carlos, but one Ronaldo, Ronaldinho when we played Brazil. But I played centre midfield against Brazil. It was my last game for Ireland. I played the second half, and Kaká played. And I tell you what, mate, he just glided across the floor, effortless. He twisted his left foot, right foot, his energy, he was up and down. And I used to think like, I was fit and I'd just wear them out by just running and, they'd have to track me back. And in the end, they'd give up and I'd get in. I used to think like that. Mate, he used to track me back. He was tackling me. He would get his hands dirty, he'd roll his sleeves up. When he got the ball, he was just quality. His touch, he had it where he wanted it. Mate, it was a privilege to be on the pitch with him. And I come off thinking, he's a proper player. He's the best. Yeah. Kaka, mate, different gravy.
Did you enjoy Istanbul even more because he was a big part of the way in which AC Milan trampled on Liverpool, and because his combination with Crespo and that the way in which he was doing what you've just described, you went hand to hand with. He was doing that Istanbul that night, but then he gets caught playing with his sock ties in one of the goals when I think maybe the Smeacher goal. But seeing him doing that, and in the first half, the club you support, and the guy that you played against, you go, here we go, and then seeing your team coming back and tipping them on their arses, that must have been a doubly fun night.
Oh, mate, I was waiting for Sky that night, so, the emotion was just, I had to keep it in check a little bit, but, yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't the greatest Liverpool team, and I did fear the worst because it was arguably one of the best Milan teams that we'd seen for a long time. And you rightly say, the first half, Kaka was unplayable. I mean, the way Stephen couldn't get to grips with him. He ran Stephen into the ground. He couldn't get near him. And for anyone to do that to Steven Gerrard is phenomenal. But then, it was a bit of a masterclass from Rafa. He knew Kaka was the problem. So did he come on? And did he, did a job on Kaka? He played in the hole. He stopped him playing for me. And that gives Stephen the licence further up the pitch to affect the game in a manner in which was probably as good as Kaka's in the first half. And, what Stephen did, it's just one of them sporting moments, isn't it, that we watch and we look upon and just think, wow, that was something special.
This is something that you need to want to do. But people will have asked you about Roy Keane in a number of different ways. But we went back and we looked, you played against Roy a lot. And one of the things that distinguished Roy was he always had to win in various different ways, whether it was the remote control in Wayne Rooney or on the pitch in the training, etc. I'd like it, if you can, Jason, to try and in club games, or training in Ireland is different, but in club games, I mean in a competitive, when you had to go up against him, what were the things that Roy did that made him such a good player? Thinking about the way you talked about, you'll have surprised a lot of people about Kaká, about him working back and getting his hands dirty and trying to tackle, because the thing that caught the eye was what he did with the ball when he had it. But and I see a lot of people who played with Roy with Ireland have said these things about his character, blah blah. But I'm more interested in your assessment of what he was like to go up against at his peak as a footballer, your peak and his peak as a footballer.
I think if you look at Roy when he was growing up, I mean, I don't know where the winning, from me, I told you before, coming from a boxing family and the way my father was with me and what have you, I don't know that with Roy. I don't know where that winning mentality at all costs comes from. He could only tell you that. But if you look at his history as growing up, he was really small in comparison to his teammates, and for his age he was really small. So I was very small until I was 15, 16. I was a late developer, and all of a sudden I woke up one day and I'd shot through the roof. And I think Roy, it was a similar story. But from my experiences of being small and playing football at an early age, you've got to learn to read the game. You've got to learn to read it. And, the first 10 yards is in your head. I know it's an old cliche, but it is. If you can see it and you can get there first, then you're going to win the ball. And you've got to learn that. And I think that comes with, obviously, being small. He physically couldn't compete. Maybe he wasn't as quick. So he had to read the game to get there first. And, one thing that he had, or one of the best attributes that he had, was he was able to read the game in a manner which, for me, made him one of the best midfielders in the world. He always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, whether it was scoring big goals like Juventus or breaking tackles up or, lending a hand, doubling up or whatever it may be. He always seemed to read the game really, really well. I I think I learnt more playing with him and being around him rather than playing against him. I didn't fear him playing against him because, you know, I always had the attitude you don't fear anybody on the football pitch. You give as good as you get, and it doesn't matter if everyone says he's the best. You've got to show everyone that you're the best. So I never feared him, and I come up against him with Sunderland. We were a lot older then, and our relationship was quite weird. We weren't mates initially. We had difference of opinions early on. We were young. We were a little bit immature, probably, the pair of us, in different things we did. Then we got older and wiser and more experienced and realised that there was a tribalism between Liverpool and Man United. So I think we had to dislike each other because of that. So we did. And then we get into our later careers, you know, I knew what button to press, you know, to wind him up. I just knew how to get to him. And I think that Sunderland Man United game, you know, I got in his head. I really got in his head. And it's like I said, it was all about winning. I said a few things to him to gain an advantage. I gained the advantage. I set the equaliser up. He ended up elbowing me in the side of the head and getting sent off. And I walked off smiling. So, you know, I felt job was done. But what I learned from playing with him is in the dressing room before a game, he demands that he demands full stop. You do everything right. Like you give 100%. You don't shirk tackles. You roll your sleeves up. You get your hands dirty. And, you know, he just demands it. And he's, you know, if he tells you off, you know, you're getting told off.
But that would sit well with you, Jason. That it feels to me that idea about doing things right, doing things to 100%, that would have sat very easily with you. I wouldn't have thought there was much to teach you in that because you had that.
Mate, I loved him, and we were very, very similar because I seen this winning mentality, and I had that winning mentality. But where I'd kind of disagree with that, right? So I've got this thing, right? So we used to stay in the airport hotel in Dublin. We used to stay in this, I'm going to use the word poxy. It was like a home from home, but it was, listen, it weren't glamorous. It weren't no Ritz, put it that way. And we used to train on a muddy pitch out by the airport. And Jack used to name the team, mate, or try and give some tactics. And the 11-15 from Liverpool would be coming into Dublin, like 40 foot above your head. You couldn't hear who was playing or like what was going on. And it'd be like, did he just say I'm playing on Wednesday? I couldn't hear. And it was like, mate, and like England would be swanning round in the latest Umbro tracksuits, mate, like we're like $1 million. We get the shit they didn't even want to wear, Ireland. We'd walk around in that shit, you know what I mean? It'd be like the dog and duck. But you know what, mate? I used to look at it and I used to think, that's what makes us who we are. That's what makes us who we are. If you give us the Ritz, if you give us the posh tracksuits and the posh training ground and the posh hotel, we ain't going to be the team that rolls our sleeves up against Croatia, against Brazil, against Italy, against Germany and beat them. Because that's who we are. That's who we are. And where we differ was Roy hated that. He hated that. He wanted to, be in the nice hotel. He wanted a proper training ground. He wanted to do everything right in that sense. And I disagreed with him. I thought, you take that away from us, we become half a team. We are who we are because of this. And, we were like the dog and duck, but we won games. I get what Roy was saying. I do get it. I get it. The World Cup stuff, 2002, I get it. Preparation could have been better. But it's not us. It wasn't us. So, we weren't Man United.
We've got socials, we've got people who've supported us, who've been with us since day one, which by Easter will be 6 years. Two quick questions. One's from Chris Hennigan and the other one's from Robert McIntosh. Jason, Chris is, like many Liverpool fans, I was frustrated after we signed you, in theory, as a midfielder. he says, an area at the time that Liverpool needed energy, dynamism, just intelligence. He said you ended up at right wing back. Despite the big success in that role, many people from that era still feel it was a case of what if you'd been more often a central midfielder for Liverpool. Do you share that? So that's one. And the other one's shorter, but it's about Liverpool too. Robert McIntosh has got a good question here. And he says, from what you know now, are there things in terms of sports psychology you could have said to the Liverpool team around 96, 97 that might have got them over the line? Or were Manchester United just a little bit better as a football side? Two vaguely related questions, certainly in their timeline.
I mean, as you know in the game, I mean, it's fine margins, isn't it? It's such fine margins. We lost the FA Cup final because, you know, Eric Cantona scored a goal in the 84th minute. You know, it could have gone either way. It wasn't a spectacle. It wasn't a great game. And it certainly wasn't because we had white suits on before the match that we lost the game. You know, if we'd have won the game, we would have looked $1 million. We lost the game and looked £1 million lira. So it was... I think the sports psychology question, it has to be broader. I had a lot of counselling because I suffered depression when I finished, and now I'm talking to a sports psychologist and a clinical psychologist now, just because I'm interested and because of various situations. But you know, I'm fascinated with it. I'm fascinated with how the brain works, how things can be affected, how you can affect things, and how you look at things, and how you can be given a problem and you got to find a solution rather than whatever. So I'm fascinated. There was none of that, mid-90s in football. It was probably the last thing to come in, with the money, the diet, the sports psychology. It just wasn't there, mate, was it? It just, wasn't offered to me. Where I think, and it goes right back to, you said something right at the beginning of this about footballers, mate. I don't share this with a lot of people, but since we're on the sports psychology of sport and how footballers are perceived, I've got this big thing about footballers at the end of the day are just human beings. We're very privileged because we do something we love and we got paid financially very well for it. But that doesn't take away the fact that we have the same problems as my mate who's a plumber, or my mate who's an electrician, or yourself who's a fantastic journalist. We all share similar problems, whether it's to do with our relationships, life, growing up, adolescent, whatever it may be. We have them same problems. I went away with Ireland, and my wife, my girlfriend at the time was pregnant. She was about 9 weeks pregnant, and I got a phone call on the Sunday night that she was losing the baby, and I flew back. It was Sunday afternoon. I flew back Sunday night, and we lost the baby, and I cried and cried and cried all night. And I got on a plane on the Monday morning, and I flew back to Dublin, and the physio and the head of security, Tony Hickey and Mick Byrne, physio and head of security, were waiting on the runway for me. And I got off the plane and I cried my eyes out. And I went and met the lads who were at the pitches, because Monday night was pitches night. And I went in and I come out, Mick McCarthy gave me a big hug, and he said, "How are you?" And I was in a state of shock. I went, "Fine." And I played on the Wednesday. My girlfriend was all right. She had family around her and all that. I was in shock. I just didn't know what to do. I cannot remember the game. I can't remember the result. I couldn't even tell you now who we played. All I remember is the pitches, flying back, and that's it. And then being on the runway. They're the biggest things in my mind about that. And, what I do take from that is I played in that game. There was 45,000 people there. They didn't have a clue. Not a clue what I'd just done. Not a clue. And they were, they had their opinion about how I played, their opinion about who I was, this, that and the other. Not a clue what had just happened to me. Not a clue. And I had to, I was young. I was about 27, maybe 28. And I had to get through that on my own. I didn't have a clue, like, how to deal with that. The emotions of that, like what effect it was going to have on me. I was upset. I didn't know how to deal with it. There was no psychologist around. And I just remember thinking, no one's got a clue what I've just been through. And they all just judge me now about how I play and how much money I earn and all this kind of stuff. And I am just like everybody else who that happens to. And like, I don't know how to handle this. So I think in them respects, I think, sports psychology is massive. I think there's a place for it. I think just for, adversity like that, I think for social media, I think for young lads who don't know how to handle certain other situations. And I think it's paramount to get the best out of sports people, elite sports people to deal with. But, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is we're human beings. We're just human beings.
Even though it's a long time and you've chosen to share it, I'm really sad about you having to go through that. It's one of the worst things that any human being, male or female, can go through. At the time, were you even... Because, again, we're of different generations, but a lot of men who are of my age, we're not taught to share anything that's painful. Had there been a sports psychologist, it's not simply that you wouldn't have had adversity on your own. He or she, the sports psychologist, might have counselled Jack or whoever, should play, shouldn't play, it's a good idea, it's a bad idea. But would you have been in a condition, would you have been able, would you have even thought about speaking to somebody back then? Because I see it in footballers, it's any admission of weakness. Even now, I think people in your position feel it's dangerous to admit pain or sorrow because it's seen as a weakness, and the culture was pretty toxic then, I think, about admitting, lads, I'm in pain.
Absolutely, mate, absolutely. I went back to an Irish squad that was very close bunch of lads. I felt comfortable being around them. I think that was my comfort zone. I wanted to get back with them. People go, I speak to some of my mates, they go, how did you go back and play? It was like I never went back to play. I went back to be with my mates. It was like, all right, the teammates, but be back with my mates. The physio and Tony, they're on the runway and they just cuddled me and I'm crying my eyes out. It's like, but the dressing room is a very harsh place, mate. Yeah, it's like there was no place to discuss mental health problems. Why do I feel this way? I can't understand why I feel like that. You couldn't do that because you were frightened of losing your place in the team. You were frightened of being sold. You were frightened of being different. It was just one of them places. We were young lads. Like I was 25 playing for Liverpool, trying to win the Premier League on 25 grand a week, which sounds great, but that comes with its own pressure because everyone wants a piece of it and you don't know what to do with it. 5 years earlier, I'm earning 100 quid. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, I'm like, bloody hell! It was like mental. It's just like, how'd you deal with that? That is a nice thing to deal with, but obviously, the pressures of winning at that age is immense. But I wouldn't know, mate. Back then, I didn't even know what a therapist was, or a counsellor, or a sports psychologist was. It was just never, and to be, to have a problem was just taboo to share it in the dressing room. I might have shared things with Jamie or Babsy or, on the QT, on the quiet, but you wouldn't want to get them back to the staff or, the senior players. Not a chance.
I don't want to be abrupt in my change of tone because you've been talking about serious, sore things. I'll maybe pick on our second sponsor's question, and I won't guide you to the answer, but Alan Stubbs I have to talk to you about. Their question is simple: which player was the biggest influence in your career?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I don't think there's any one player, who made the impact. I think different players at different times added so much to my career. I mentioned him before, Andy Walker. Learning to link up with the front man. His attitude, the way he trained, the way he was. He taught me a lot. Andy, I'm a big fan of Andy Walker's. John McGinn as well. Barnesy, even Roy Keane taught me a few things. Even though we're a similar age, you learn from players like that. Not one particular. But I think if you were saying to me one person had the biggest influence, I'd probably go back to Bruce Rioch. But obviously I never played with him. He was my manager. But he weren't a manager to me. He was like a father figure. He was just like a father figure.
Okay, with George Michael's music and father figure echoing in our brain, what links you, Dennis Bergkamp and Roberto Carlos?
Bruce Rioch.
Why?
Arsenal. Because when Bruce, he left, didn't he? We'd got promoted and, I thought I was going to leave before him, and then he ended up going to Arsenal. And then my agent rings, obviously the Blackburn's involved, then Liverpool, they get involved. And then Bruce rings me, I'm at home. And Bruce just says, listen, I know you're a Liverpool fan. I'm going to try and persuade you to come to Arsenal. I want you and your mum to fly to London. We'll pick you up and just give me the opportunity to have a chat. He said, listen, I've got... there was 4 players he wanted. There was 4 players. I can never remember the 4th, but I do remember Dennis Bergkamp, Roberto, and this is the first time, one and only time I've ever been put in the same sentence as these 2. Dennis Bergkamp, Roberto Carlos and Jason McAteer were the 3 players. There was a 4th, but I can't remember who it was. And he wanted to sign them 4 players. And obviously he tried to sign me, and I just said, listen, I'm going to Liverpool.
And why did fear of... People won't know who Steve Carroll is, but why did fear of Steve Carroll nearly land you in some sort of secure location? What is your background in causing a threat to Britain's nuclear industry?
You see, this is why you're one of the best journalists around, because you're very, very good at keeping everything sort of in a nutshell. And what I mean by that is you've asked me such a broad question there, but it all relates back to that mini Metro I bought for £2,000. So Steve Carroll was the reserve team manager at Bolton, and we loved him. He looked like Freddie Starr, to be honest. And we had a game midweek. Reserve teams were like team games a Tuesday, Wednesday night, aren't they? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. Anyway, I picked the lads up from Aylwood and Speke, and the arse was hanging out of this mini Metro, and we're on the way in for the game. And next thing, all the lights come on this mini Metro, all 3 of them come on. And it's obviously the car is like, it's given up. It's like, I've had enough. I can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. So I see this sign, car park. And there was these the big chimneys that you see, the big massive ones, right? And they were there and there was smoke coming out of them. So come off the motorway, see this sign, see this car park. Just razz into the car park, park the car up, and one of the lads is runs to the phone box. He's on the phone. He rings it. I'm not sure whether it was he rings somebody who comes and gets us, his dad, or we managed to get a taxi. I can't quite remember that. So anyway, this car comes. We all dive in it. We all leg it. We're legging it. So we got out the car. We're all legging it. So next thing we're in this other car. We go to the game. We play the game. Just get in time. Steve's on the clock, innit? It's just made it. He gets in. Might have even just been a little bit late. Plays the game. Anyway, we finishes the game. There's 2 coppers. Right? We get called to the office. So there's 2 policemen come to see you. So we're oh my God, what's going on here? First thing you think, family and all that, don't you? So we go in. And they're the copper, you can see them, they've put 2 and 2 together and they've come up with this, yeah, we know what's going on here. But they stay in copper mode, policeman mode, don't they? So they go, could you just watch this video, a video? So next thing, he gets the video cassette. He's tables there with the telly on it, the old video record. He puts it in, mate. It's this CCTV footage, right? It's got all the numbers on the top and all that. They're grainy. You see the mini Metro pull in, next thing, next thing, 4 lads get out, we're that, running down. It's British Nuclear Fuels. And they think it's a terrorist attack. We're leaving this car and 4 lads are legging it. And then they've realised that it's my name linked to the car and whatever. Their phone got, and they've ended up at Bolton. And they realised I've said, mate, my car's just packed up and we had to get to the game because Steve was going to fine us. And they're what? So then they explained how dangerous it was. And from their point of view, they thought it was an act of terrorism. And
second time I've stood up for you in 5 minutes. Shouldn't it have been a little bit harder to get into the car park if it was a secure
Exactly.
location? I'd only say.
Mate, I don't want to put it out there and I don't want to put things in people's heads, but it's pretty easy. It ain't rocket science.
Mate. Actually it is, but never mind. Listen, I want to wrap up. You can choose if you speak about Harry's challenge. Stubbsy's saying to you, we had a Tim Sherwood interview in this series, and Tim was on the train with his agent Eric Hall, who'd been an agent with Queen and Elton John and all this. And Eric Hall was taking him to Derby to sign for Arthur Cox, and Kenny Dalglish phones and says, "Come to Blackburn." And Tim has to say to Arthur Cox, "I know I was going to sign, but Kenny Dalglish." And Arthur Cox goes to him, lad, I wish you would come to us, but I understand it's candidly. Off you go. Football doesn't work like that an awful lot. And your mate Stubbsy said that to you. This is a great story about friendship. I'm saying, listen, Chase, if it's Liverpool, you've got to go there. That to me is extraordinary. Harry's challenge. And you can pick one of those to speak about, and then we're going to finish on sliding doors, because I have to ask you about sliding doors moments in life. So, Harry's challenge, Stubbsy saying, I give you my blessing, go to Anfield. You choose, boss, you choose.
Yeah, I think the Stubbsy one, because it keeps with the Bolton theme and, you know, the cars, and we spoke about him. And Kenny, you just mentioned Tim and Kenny. You know, obviously I got that phone call as well. Yeah, mate, we get the phone call on the way into training. Our agent says, Blackburn have agreed 9 million quid for you and Alan. Can you turn the car around, go and have talks with Kenny Dalglish and Ray Harford in a hotel up the East Lancs? So that's 8.5 million quid for me and 500 grand for Stubbsy, innit?
I'm only letting you keep that in if you tell me how many times you've used that line.
Mate, all the time. Well, to be honest, mate, the figures never come out. I mean, everyone just assumes it was 50-50, 4.5 each. I'm not having it. Mate, I was miles better than Stubbsy. Anyway, and this is Alan, not Ray, I'm talking about. So we get up the East Lancs Road. We go into the hotel, agents there, and we go in, and I go in first. And Stubbsy's a massive Everton fan. So obviously I'm a massive Liverpool fan. Goes in, I'm having talks with Kenny. I'm like starstruck. Man, I'm starstruck. It's like Kenny Dalglish sitting right in front of me. Not only sitting in front of me, wants to pay 8.5 million quid for me. So anyway, we're having these talks. He's telling me, like, he's trying to sell the club and what's going on to me. They just won the Premier League. Halfway through the meeting, my agent's phone goes. He goes out the room. So I'm like sitting here like that. So next week, he comes back in and he goes, Kenny, he said, Liverpool have been on the phone. He said, they want to sign Jason for 4.5 million quid. So Kenny just went, the deal's off. Deal's off. He said, I signed both players or none. So I'm like, whoa. So Kenny says, go and talk to Alan, see what he thinks. So I go out and I go to Stubbsy, listen, Liverpool have just been on it. They've agreed 4.5 million quid. And I got to be fair to him, mate. It's like amazing. He's just gone to me, you've got to sign for him. So he goes, I know you're a massive Liverpool fan. And I went, but Stubbsy, like, it's the two of us or none. It's like, you know, we both go to Blackburn. He goes, I don't care. He said, this is your opportunity to sign for Liverpool. And he went to me, he went, I know if it was Everton and the shoe was on the other foot, you would do it for me. I remember thinking, is he sure? There's not a chance I would do that. There's not a chance. And I was like, cheers, Stubbsy, mate. And do you know what the mad thing is, Graham? Get onto this, right? The mad thing is, the week before, right, we were on Match of the Day, right? And we got interviewed after the game. And me and Stubbsy done the interview. And the presenter, the fellow went, so I believe that there's a transfer imminent with you two, like, leaving the football club. And I just remember Stubbsy going, watch this space. And then next thing, like, we end up having talks with Blackburn. I bin him. He has to go back to he has to go back to Bolton. I've buggered off to Liverpool. He come out, run out for Bolton. He got booed. The Bolton fans booed him. Mate, I'm like that running out at Anfield. Oh, Stubbsy. Oh, mate, it's brilliant. You couldn't buy it. You could not buy it.
Friendship needs to be a really elastic, powerful thing because it gets stretched at times. But he did you a square one then. Jason, this has been an experience which is exactly as I anticipate. And all the research I did made me think, yeah, I'm going to enjoy this, and I have. But I'm still going to close on a difficult one. 1963, this mad St Johnstone centre forward goes to Ibrox to play Rangers. And I think scores 3 times. The first time that any Scottish striker had gone there and scored 3 times. And it prevents him from emigrating to Canada. And his name's Ferguson, Alex Ferguson. And he'd been so sick of life in Scotland and how things were going for him in football that he'd got his papers to emigrate to Canada, and he ducked out of a midweek match for St Johnstone, got Martin, his brother's girlfriend, to phone and say he was sick. And he got such a rocket from his mum and from St Johnstone that he went back turned up you're in the first team against Rangers on Saturday, turned up, scores 3, thinks, this is okay. And here we are later, he's Sir Alex Ferguson, and he's done all the things that have pissed you off over the years. You didn't go to Ohio, but Ohio and Tiff and John and so on was the moment when some sort of pressure went off your shoulders. You played brilliant for Marine, you caught Bolton's eye, and your life changed. Do you ever think, or if you do think now about, because America was for you as well, if you think about the impact that World Cup had on you, do you ever think of what Jason McAteer, spent the last 30 years in the States, might have experienced, might have been like? I'm certain with what you've gone through, there won't be many regrets, so I'm not talking about that. But the sliding doors moment, let's say you hadn't played that brilliantly against Marine, or you hadn't gone back because you were homesick and you'd stayed out there rather than coming home for Christmas, and all the things that land of opportunity holds, the types of opportunities, the fact that they were going to provide a house for your mum, all this kind of stuff. Do you ever stop to think, or if you do think now, what would life have been like for Jason McAteer if the sliding doors moment had been the other way?
Yeah, I've definitely been working in Hooters for a bit. I know I would have done that. And going to Disney every summer. Yeah, I mean, how it could have been so different. I get asked that question a lot, like what if this had happened and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, innit? It's a difficult one. What could have been, what. I don't know, but would I be sitting here, talking to you? I wouldn't, would I? So I think you've got to thank or look at it that everything happens for a reason, and we are where we are. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a tremendous opportunity. I've been over there for 3 months. I come back, and like you say, I was just in the right place at the right time. It was, it was phenomenal how it happened. It probably won't never happen again. A kid signing from non-league, 20 years of age, he's playing in the World Cup 4 years later, goes and plays for Liverpool, and it is that Roy the Rover story. Unfortunately, I've got no shiny stuff to go with it, but that doesn't bother me. I just look at it as what an opportunity I got given. Don't get me wrong, I worked hard. I'm not saying it was given to me, but I worked damn hard to get there, and like you say, through plenty of adversity and knockbacks. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know, mate. I had no idea. I was lost. I'd signed on the dole when I was 19. I'd signed on the dole. That's where I was at with my career. I was playing local football, semi-professional for Marine, waiting in a pub, doing a graphic design course at college. I'd finished that. I had nowhere to go. America was beckoning because of a scholarship, but I'd signed on the dole. So, who knows? Who knows?
It tells you that dreams can come true. Your one has been a pretty impressive one. It's been good of you to share it with us. I don't need to wish you luck with your golf game, because the amount of practice that you put into, when you speak to yourself, I can see low single figures handicap really soon. I wish you luck with the work you're doing on the mind. That's a long term, and it's an intricate project. It's good that you're doing it. I could do with it, maybe just because I'm older and more hidebound. I try to keep it all in. It's a bad idea, probably. But I wish you strength and success with that. And soon, I suppose, I wish you what you want in the world of sport, whether it be management, whether it be football director, whatever it is, more analysis. For the football world is a better place with Jason McAteer in it. I've enjoyed it a lot. You've been generous. The big interview thanks you. I hope that it hasn't been boring. There you are.
It's been an absolute privilege, mate, and I'm glad that you've had me on. It has been brilliant.